Alrighty, business owners, this one is for you. Any friends or family that are business owners, please share this one around. So this one I'm extremely passionate about because I've newly become a sole business owner myself. And so what that means is I not only fully understand this game and it's now new for me as well. Well, sorry, no longer new because I'm now going fully into it, but it's also something I'm so passionate about because a lot of in the market, especially when it comes to lending, is it's more geared towards employees. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that. So let's go through a little bit of the agenda as to what I would like to go through with you today. So first thing is I'm going through a scenario of, should I pay myself more taxes? It's the biggest thing that business owners get their heads wrapped around because we're so good at reducing our taxes, but yet screwing our borrowing capacity and not being able to build wealth as easy as what we possibly could. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a list of, what's the word I'm trying to look for? A list of advantages. I had to look up the word I was thinking of just then. So let's go through a scenario that I have for us both. So scenario number one is, I'm just going to make myself a little bit small here. Okay, so as a business owner, do I pay myself more pay myself a wage, which then results in paying more tax? Or do I miss out on investing altogether? Obviously, that's not why you're here. Okay, Mr. Business Owner, I'm now talking to you. I'm just going to move myself over here. Okay, so I've got a scenario. Scenario one is, let's just say your business is doing 50K in terms of profit. Let's talk more EBITDA here in this scenario. Right, I'm just going to break this down. So when I say EBITDA, for those in business, this is before taxes and depreciation, right? So I'm talking about what is your profit after all of your business expenses, but before any of your tax expenses, right? So let's just say you've made $500,000 in profit for the year. You have $100,000 in cash or in equity to pull out from another property to invest into the next one. So you've got 100K to play with, right? And you're only currently paying yourself less than 18 grand a year. So therefore you're paying zero in taxes for the year. This is a thing a lot of business owners come to me with, right? Which means they're paying zero in taxes, but guess what? It means their lending power is also zero. All right. So they've done really good as a business owner, being very highly profitable, but able to wipe off everything. I've now learned since being in this industry how good business owners are at doing that. So next scenario is scenario A. Scenario two is same thing, 500K in profit for the year. But instead this time, paying yourself about 120 grand. Now, to do that, just to let you know, the average lending in Australia, this is how it works, right? This is some juicy stuff here. Average lending is essentially 7 to 10 times your income, right? Let's just use, because especially with interest rates being so high at the moment, let's just use 6% to be times 6 to be very, very conservative, okay? So all I've done is I've gone 120K times 6. That would equal 720 in terms of lending. Now, however, in this scenario, you're like, well, fuck, Olivia, now it means I have to pay 32K in taxes. Okay, but look at this as a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. All right. So yeah, you're paying 32K in taxes now where you weren't previously. However, you can now use that $100,000 and partner that with the bank's money, let's just say for $400,000. So you've now got an asset worth $500,000. Now in Australia, the average amount that property goes up in Australia, I'm using very average numbers here, is 7%. So nationally across Australia, if you were to go out and buy a property, it is likely that your property will grow in value 7% every year over a 10-year period, which means that's where the whole property doubles every 10 to 12 years in Australia, which is factually true. So what that means is if you apply 7% growth on a $500,000 property, that means your profit on that property is 35K. But hang on a second. Oh, Olivia, I've just paid 32K in taxes. See what I mean? So what that means is, yes, you paid the government 32K in taxes, but you've just made in profit in capital growth 35K. So you've made back more than what you actually paid in terms of taxes, right? And then if you compound that over 10 years, that's 540 grand. 504K, sorry, over a 10-year period, just from one property. So my question is to you, do you think it's worth sacrificing and even though you're just like, fuck the government, I don't want to pay taxes either, right? No, I don't think anyone does, right? Because they don't fucking apply it in the right places. Anyway, so once you really understand the system, they're really dodgy and they don't actually pay for shit from the money that you pay. But anyway, that's another whole entire wormhole to get into. So do you think as a business owner, it's worth paying $32,000 in taxes in order to make $500,000 over a 10-year period whilst you sleep? Very key factor to understand that, right? Now, if you were to buy this property inside your personal name, guess what else you would then get? Tax deductions. I haven't even talked about that yet, right? That's an additional thing on top of that. Tax deductions, especially in the first couple of years, right? Especially depreciation is even higher. So you can then even get back depreciation, which you're going to come back to that as well. So this is a scenario that I get so often. Oh, Olivia, but I don't want to pay taxes. I get it, nor do I. But which game do you want to play more? I get it. Some people have a bit of a chip on their shoulders and they're like, no fucking way am I paying the government a cent. I haven't paid taxes in 20 years, so I'm not about to start to now. And it's like, okay, cool, you play that game though. But for a lot of business owners, they're also extremely, extremely active in their business. So it's like, what forms of passive income do you actually have outside of your business? So many business owners I see hustling and grinding and they love business and they know how to make heaps of money, but that is typically the active way. Right? What happens if you were to cark it tomorrow? Is your family actually supported in terms of a passive income coming in from a portfolio? That's something that I'm so passionate about this, because business owners are the one people, which I'm going to get into. Anyway, I'm not going to go on a tangent. I'm going to save it for the next thing. Okay, the list that you should absolutely be frothing is what are the unfair but upside advantages for business owners. I love looking at this list when you think about it. Okay, so the number one most common problem with business owners is the lending on taxes, which is what I've just shown you. So not paying themselves enough. And I think that there is a fine line between, you don't have to pay yourself in that last scenario, the full 500K, right? But you could pay yourself, you could go back to your broker and say, hey, Mr. Broker, how much do I need to pay myself in order to lend to get to the next one? I just gave you an example of 120 grand. That's not that much, right? If you're in comparison to you making 500, really. So it might even only be 80 grand, by the way, in that last scenario, right? That you might need to pay yourself. Or maybe it's only 60K, right? Because you might have a partner that's also got some borrowing capacity. So sometimes it's not even that much, all right? So number two, banks care more about the last 2 financial years, not the last 10. This is very, very critical to get. So you might have had a business that did absolutely amazing for 10 years in a row, and then 2020 hit thanks to COVID, and your business could have been completely fucking out the window, right? But then it might have come back by 2021, right? But guess what? And then, so say for example, 2022 comes around and you're like, look, bank, my business was for the last 12 years. They don't really care about that. They just care about the last 2 years. And they might look at your books and say, well, fuck, 2021 was good, but 2020 was absolute shit. We can't use it. So just to let you know, the banks typically for business owners care about the last 2 years in terms of financials. So yeah, it is easier for employees to just go and get a job. And I'm not even joking. Most employees and most jobs, as long as it's a full-time contract, only need 1 month's worth of bloody pay slips. So I don't believe that it's harder for business owners. I just think it's different and it's not often spoken about. That's all. So for business owners, you just need to think for yourself. So for example, I thought about this. I was at my comfortable 9-to-5 corporate job at Optus and I was like, right, I'm going to leave what movers. And I knew, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to lend anything for at least 2 years, plus add on another 6 months of bloody work trying to get your accountant to then do the books and get your actual, taxes done and stuff. And then by the time you actually get your team to source something. So I was like, basically it meant me leaving my 9-to-5 job. I basically knew in my mind, I'm not going to be able to borrow. I'm not going to be able to buy property for 3 years. I'm going to be on hold for. That's a really long time for me to have made that big decision to say, am I willing to put my entire portfolio and wealth building on hold for 3 years? Yeah, I was, because I'm so passionate about what I do. So anyway, the last 2 financial years are really, really important. Now, in saying that, there are still lenders who will lend to you with just 1 year of financial books, okay? Now, the downside to those lenders is they're typically what we would call like tier 2 or tier 3 lenders, or low doc lenders, low doc loans, for example. So those are type of lenders where, in my personal opinion, I still think they're absolutely amazing. I literally have a low doc loan already for one of my mortgages. I see no problem with using them whatsoever. The only downside to using them is, the interest rate is a little bit higher, but who cares? I would rather have the higher interest rate so I can get the property cheaper right now, lock that in, and then I'll just change lenders like 12 months later. Like, so many people don't think about the actual long-term opportunity cost of making the decision around the interest rates. Okay, so 2 years is the most important, and that's financial years, not just last 2. No, it's not year to date. Now, so that was number 3. So awesome hack. As business owners, we actually get to change our books, right? We have the flexibility to turn around and say, well, this year I'm going to make my business look more profitable, right? Or the next financial year, I'm going to go into a year where I don't plan on buying properties, and maybe instead it's a business strategy, and my business strategy is all around scaling my business, so therefore my expenses are going to be high. Like it tends to be like a graph where it's just like, okay, I'm now scaling and I look really, profit is low. And then the following year, it's like, okay, now we're not scaling and we're now just refining and focusing on revenue. And so that cycle in business, you need to align that with your property portfolio as well, right? So I'm constantly thinking, okay, in business, how do I want my books to look if I'm going to be investing? Am I going to be investing next year? Okay, well then I need to make myself look profitable and maybe reduce some of the expenses, okay? And not scale business so quickly or so aggressively, sorry. Now, number 5 is so like not known about that much. For business owners, we can actually choose to use the company's profit or what we pay ourselves. Oh, amazing. Some lenders, not all lenders. So you need to speak to a broker. This is why having an elite broker who primarily serves business owners is so critical as well, okay? So how good is that? Like, I can choose to use the 500K in the last scenario, the 500K number, or I can choose to use the number that I'm paying myself of 120K. It depends on the lender. Again, the interest rates change and all of these different things change. So terms and conditions and flexibility of different loans. So the broker is the most important person you have on your team here. They always are. The other thing is we can diversify our income to our partner, right? So if we're buying property with our partner and our partner maybe has a lower income, we can actually obviously diversify the income to reduce the taxes, but still have a more impactful borrowing capacity, right? So for example, I was making $1 million in business, right? And I wanted to turn around and say, well, I don't want to pay the classic 180 rule, right? I don't want to pay myself any more than 180K in taxes, but maybe that's not enough in terms of to keep my property afloat or borrow as much. And it changes because the larger your property portfolio gets, especially during the acquiring phase, your borrowing capacity gets hit like a lot. Maybe, for example, my 180K is not enough for me to borrow for the next property, right? It's just I have 6 properties and I'm like, fuck, I need to get the 7th one. Maybe 180 is not enough. But hang on a second. If I increase my 180 above that next biggest tax threshold, it obviously might make sense for me to then, instead of paying myself an extra $60,000, maybe I pay that to my partner who is going to be a part of the lending anyway, right? So big bonus and leverage that we have there if you've got a partner that you're buying in with as well. Okay, number 7. Oh, this is also not really known about. And I only just recently found this out like 12 months ago and I fucking flipped my shit because I was like, this is so good. So depreciation literally can be added back on to your borrowing capacity. What the fuck? So depreciation is obviously not an expense. So for us business owners, if we want to get the maximum amount of tax deductions, which obviously is quite known for, right, from an accounting perspective, but what most people don't know from a lending perspective is that the broker can actually add back on that depreciation onto your borrowing capacity. Boom. So for example, let's just say you have a car and you're writing off the classic, $60,000 per year off a car. Okay, sweet. That can be added back on. So it's two birds with one stone. We can get the better tax deductions and write that off, right? But then it can also get, as a bonus, be added back onto your borrowing capacity. I think depreciation is literally the words, it should be one of the 12 wonders of the world, I reckon, because it is, it's just a double whammy all over the place. When I found this out, I was like, this is freaking incredible, especially for those who use, like if you've got a large company, you've got a lot of cars, or maybe you are in a product-based business and you've got a lot of like machinery, like this is just, this is so good. So there you go, depreciation can be added back on. Even I'm still like trying to wrap my head around how amazing this is. And sometimes I wake up some days and I'm like that excited of like how awesome this is for business owners. Okay, number 8. This is an interesting one. Also something that's not spoken about. Your time flexibility. As a business owner, typically compared to employees, now yes, things and times have changed in the employment world, especially in the last 3 years with COVID. A lot of employees have more time up their sleeve, but than usual, than the past or the history. However, nowadays, us business owners, right, we have the option to say, fuck, if I've got a settlement coming up and something, maybe I need to race to the post office and send off a bank document, or maybe I need to quickly take a call because my buyer's agent's like, Olivia, we have this most amazing deal, but we've only got 6 hours to put in a call. You need to review it, right? As a business owner, I have more time and freedom and flexibility for me to control and say, I'm dropping everything. Like, guys, team, look after this, or reschedule clients or whatever. But for some employees, they don't have the option to do that. So, and especially for those business owners who are also based on their computer, right? They've got computer-based jobs. They're even, again, have more time flexibility as well to respond to emails and stuff, right? These little things add up. Now, to compare to, say, for example, my tradie friends who aren't on a computer, and even my tradie business owners, right? I've got one client who owns a pool company, and he has now been able to scale his business to the point where he's outsourced everything. He's now got the time freedom to now scale a property portfolio because now he's doing more computer-based quoting stuff as opposed to being on the ground, right? But he's like, 3 years ago, Liv, there was no way known, even though my business was doing amazing, there's no way known I had the time flexibility to be able to even look at building a property portfolio. So there you go. Number 9, holding GST or revenue inside the offsets. Also an amazing tool that you can have up your sleeve. So for some business owners, they'll set up their business accounts to go directly into their offsets, which I think is an amazing hack as well. So working with your accountant on your books, it can be a little bit messy to do it, but I highly recommend it, because if I've got GST, or maybe I have a whole bunch of revenue inside the business and I can offset that. So one thing that I've learned is business owners have a shitload more cash savings and buffers than what employees do, because employees, it's more like safety that they're going to get that next check. But I realized that business owners are a lot more risk adverse and have a lot more cash savings in their bank account. I've got a lot of business owners who come to me. They're like, yeah, Liv, I've got $2 million, but I need to know, I only want to spend like 300 or 400 of that. Is that enough? Like, I need to have at least $1 million buffer. And the businesses aren't even that high in terms of expenses. But yeah, we have the option to really reduce our mortgages, which is on its own a cash flowing from now you're combining 2 different businesses to work together as well. So huge benefits. Number 10, I'm just going to read this one out. Business owners typically have advanced tax and structural. Oh yeah, this is really good. So typically when it comes to business owners, they find it easier because they've had a history or a background on working with their accountants, right? If you were just an employee, and I don't mean just employees, sorry, I don't mean to put that down at all. If you were an employee, having an accountant isn't anywhere near as important to have an accountant on your team just for a property investor as opposed to a business owner. So business owners, I now understand, one of the most important person that you have on your team as a business owner is your accountant, right? And a lot of business owners come with that advantage of understanding company structures, trust structures, bucket companies. Oh my God, such huge advantages, right? And it helps the progression and the understanding of business and building a property portfolio as well, because to number 12, I'm going to skip to number 12 now, because building a property portfolio is just like running a business, right? So therefore your mindset around building a property portfolio, you need to think your property portfolio the same as your business. If you're the CEO of your property portfolio, aka business, your main job is to consistently raise money. That's the number one thing. The second thing is be the visionary, right? And explaining the goals, and then letting go, right? Letting go and making your team do things. What I also typically find is most business owners are much better at outsourcing and letting go and not being so analytical and just trusting the process. It's quite interesting though. No judgment. I'm just saying factually, that's what I see is a lot of employees typically mindsets, they like more negative gearing, whereas did I even put this down? No, I didn't. Employees are more drawn towards negative gearing, which is where business owners are more drawn towards positive gearing because they understand cash flow, because it's like a business, and in their mind they're like, well, it's a business, it needs to make money, right? So from a mindset perspective, business owners have a bit of a leg up on the employees from a mindset perspective of running it like a business, and they understand what their role is more, and they're better at outsourcing, so aka hiring a professional and just getting the hell out of their way to do their job. So typically I find business owners good at doing that as well, and typically because they're quite time poor, right? And what I teach my business owner clients is get the hell out of the way and outsource as much as possible. And yeah, it's just huge benefits. Okay, now when I say downsides, these aren't really that negative. And you'll probably looking at that screen, right? The upsides far outweigh the downsides anyway for us business owners. So we're very lucky. So the things to consider, I should probably change this to considerations actually and use better language. We typically need to wait until the next financial year to lend or amend our lending, right? So for example, say I had an employee and my employee was like, oh, I can just go to my boss and get a pay rise, or hey, I'm planning on getting a pay rise anyway. That person can use that pay rise instantly as an employee. Whereas a business owner, it might take a full entire financial year to actually pay ourselves, increase our wage and pay ourselves more. So that's the only other downside to it. The main downside to it's just a timing thing. That's all. But for some business owners, you might be paying yourself enough right now just to buy one property, but you just need to be consciously aware that you've got to increase that for the next couple of properties thereafter. I've literally got a client in that scenario right now, actually. Number 2 is most business owners are obsessed with business. They're good at it and they end up retiring. Oh, yes. Okay. This is one that if you're already watching this and already in this course, it is likely that you've actually already decided to actually invest outside your business. But it is factually true. I've read reports on this and there's so many studies that business owners end up at the end of the day, a lot of them end up retiring poorer than employees. And the reason why that is because business owners are like, oh, I love business so much. My asset and how I make so much money is in my business. And I agree with that. I agree with sticking all the billionaire people that I look up to, they say the same thing. Focus your energy on what you're good at on what you're good at doing and where your money is making. Mine is obviously in property. So I put all my energy in there. So if your skills and your way to 10x your wealth is in business, stick to business and don't put too much focus on the properties and just let the property portfolio, let your experts basically nurse that in, right? But what I typically find is because business owners are just like, oh, well, I know how to 10x this and 10x that and 10x this inside business and I'm so fucking good at this, because they literally are. But what they forget is, have they actually built anything passive? They're so obsessed with the activeness of business and hustling, right? I've got business coaches in my life and maybe one of them's going to watch this, where they're constantly chasing, which actually goes to my number 4, the pursuit of more. Right? For business owners, it's like, when is enough? They're so hungry and their entrepreneurial spirit is typically like, yeah, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? It's like, when are you going to start building a passive income outside of your active income? Especially if you have a family. Yeah, cool. You personally might thrive that business and that active life. But what happens if you were to get sick? Does your family have some sort of passive income to support to support that as well. So entrepreneurs out there, have a think about that for me and talk about, does your partner feel safe? If you've got a partner out there with kids, do they feel safe that they're going to be looked after in terms of passive income? If you were to cark it tomorrow, can your businesses run without you? All right. Number 4 is that most lending is designed. Oh, yes. So most banks, most mortgages are built and designed by bankers who are what? Employees. So to one of the other points up earlier is this is even another reason why your broker who works with a lot of business owners is critical as well, because the terms and conditions and the vetting process for business owners isn't that well thought out. And yeah, therefore the broker that you have is one of the most important people that you have on your team. So it is something to consider. And just be mindful of as well. I don't think it's a huge downside. I just think it's something to be aware of. That's it. So in terms of this business video, what would be really cool is if you jumped into the Facebook group and just share just 1 or 2 key takeaways that you took away from this video. Please share it with anyone and highlight something like, yo, business owners, just watch the business owner training. This is a light bulb moment I had. Who else had that? And I think you don't even have to ask a question. You could just literally just share your thoughts. And the reason being is because you might actually start to see a lot of the other business owners in the group as well, and build out, again, that like-minded community of other business owners who have gone through some lending hurdles too. So to wrap up this call for business owners investing in property, try and think to yourself, what am I doing to build wealth outside of my business? And if someone puts down and says business owners, it's lending is harder, I don't believe it's harder. It's just different and it's just not often spoken about. So hopefully you got a lot of value out of this video. I'll see you in the next one.